Some heirloom sewing techniques are not only simple, they are simple and they have a wow factor that leads students to respond in amazement as the process unfolds. Madeira Applique, the easy way, is one of those wow techniques. Since success with your heirloom sewing is the reason for our visit today, we have tips and techniques that will give your hand embroidery a great beginning. We will add a bit of pintucked pizzazz to an enchanting doll dress. Successful projects are mere moments away, so let's begin, shall we? Welcome to my sewing room. I don't think there is anything as much fun to sew as new baby clothes. Look at this adorable day gown. Made out of a white Swiss batiste, the rounded yoke is so pretty and has a blue fabric blended into the yoke, gathered lace, and look at this wonderful, wonderful Madeira applique with the blue on the white coming down the front. The bottom of the day gown is perfectly exquisite with entredeaux and lace. And I just want to share with you how easy it is to make the Madeira applique, which is so pretty. First of all, you're going to draw a line, the scallop line, on a piece of blue fabric, if you're going to use blue and white, that is. Then you're going to straight stitch along that line, being very careful to make a perfect point. Now let me pull this up so you can see that a little bit better. Then make little slits along the curves, just little tiny slits, and then I'm going to need two hands for this. You very carefully fold it back and roll it back where you do not see the line of sewing and press. Then for the final step, you put your finished Madeira piece on top of your batiste, and this is a wonderful pin stitch or Madeira applique stitch. And by the way, some people call it point de Paris or point de Paris stitch also. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Nina McVeigh. Nina is an educator trainer for Bernina of America. Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha.
And what a beautiful little day gown you made for our viewers.
Thank you. Isn't it fun?
Oh, it's beautiful.
To begin that process, I like doing it because it's fun, it's easy, it's fairly quick. As you said, you're going to draw that line on your piece of fabric, the colored fabric that you want on top of the white fabric. I've used a black marker here just so you can see the line. Of course, you're not going to do that. You are going to use a water-soluble marker to draw that line. Then what you want to do is stitch right on that line at your machine, and I tend to use a straight stitch that's a little bit shorter so that I have a very fine stitching line here. I'm then going to trim away that excess fabric so it is in the shape of the scallop, about 1/4 inch, and then take a couple little clips in the fabric and then press that over so that you cannot see that stitching line. It will just, as you said, roll over, and the line of stitching will roll to the back. Then place that piece of fabric on your white fabric and go to the machine. I have used a pin stitch, or as many of our quilters might know it, the blanket stitch. And I have actually on this fine fabric shortened the stitch length and narrowed the stitch width just a little bit. So as we go over to the machine, as I said, I have that stitch all set up and I've shortened the length and width. I have also moved my needle position into a far right position, so that I can keep the edge of my applique fabric just inside the toe of this open toe foot.
And you do like the open toe embroidery?
I do.
Okay.
It lends me a great deal of visibility. I am using a size 90 needle. I know that sounds funny on this fine fabric, but it will create just that fine little hole like a pin stitch. And you know what? When you don't want that wing needle, for instance, on this
beautiful thin batiste. Sometimes the wing needles make a little bit too big a hole. I love the 90 needle for the wing needle work too, Nina, on the fabrics you're using.
And so these techniques are really back to basic applique techniques, so that as I get to that point, I want my machine to stop right in the very tip of that applique. Turn it halfway and do one stitch in the point, and then turn it again.
Turning that perfect corner.
And again, I can keep the edge of my fabric just even with the inside toe of the foot. It makes it a lot easier on your eyes to do that. And just go ahead and follow that curve all the way around, and what you get is that beautiful Madeira applique.
Now I'm going to hold this up again so we can look at that beautiful Madeira applique stitch after you have used that 90 needle and done your wing needle work going down the front. Absolutely perfect, Nina.
And then to accent that, I've done the same thing here when I folded back for the placket. I've just stitched that down with that same 90 needle.
Stitch that placket down.
To create that same
And you use
look.
the same Madeira applique or the blanket stitch?
Yes.
That tiny, tiny one with the 90
the
needle.
pin stitch.
Oh, Nina, this is so beautiful. Thank you so much.
you.
And now Nina has some absolutely gorgeous sewing inspirations to share with you. Nina, that you have brought some of the most beautiful ideas, this beautiful little ecru dress. Tell me about it.
Well, this was actually done for a doll because we love to do that, and it is, although it's almost baby size, so it could be worn by a small baby for a christening.
A beautiful, beautiful ecru, and this has a special story. Let me hold this one up. And
this was my first grandson's christening gown, and this has a large, I don't know if you can see it, but a large Celtic knot.
Let's hold that out so
in
they
the
can see the
center of it.
lace-shaped
So
Celtic
that was very
McVeigh,
fun to do.
that's a good Irish name,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, it is.
This is absolutely beautiful. And the pin tucks and that wonderful, wonderful lace shaping and a very full skirt. And this is very special too.
This actually belonged to one of my boys when he was just a little one. Of course, with the picture smocking, and I love the button-on pants. And there will be lots of little boys, I think, in the family who can wear this. Certainly, this first grandson, I hope, will wear it.
That's one of the joys of this kind of sewing.
Yes,
they are heirlooms, and it's just as beautiful today as it was. How old is your son that wore this today?
He's 24.
24. It's just as beautiful today as it was 24 years ago. And again, hopefully, it will be passed down from generation to generation.
Yes.
Oh, Nina, thank you for bringing these family treasures to share with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And now Nina has a so quick, so easy idea for you. Nina, I love the story that goes along with your little pillow.
This is a little pillow or a potpourri holder that is a great gift idea. I happen to be doing these for my daughter's wedding for her bridesmaids. So at their little bridal luncheon, they will each get one of these. But they're very, very simple to do, especially if you want a quick heirloom gift. You're simply going to take a piece of linen, and in the embroidery portion of my machine, of course, I did the monogram. And then I have just drawn a square within the square. I've just drawn another square at an angle on my original square. And then I have just laid straight pieces of lace on top of that square, using the wing needle and a pin stitch to stitch that down. Once I have those 4 pieces down, I'm going to create the back, and it's just taking 2 pieces of fabric and overlapping it. Now I have finished those with a serged edge. Overlapped them so that they fit my top square. I have then put those 2 pieces together, and I am now going to lay my entredot on top of all of those layers and stitch it down. once I get this entredeaux on here, I am going to finish this seam. So the seam is to the outside, but it will be rolled and so cleanly finished that you will not even see that. And then I'm going to add that wide piece of lace to the entredeaux around the outside
Just
edge.
butting it up and zigzagging it to the edge.
So I get my finished little potpourri holder.
Now I have to ask you a question. Whose monogram? I mean, what letter are you putting on each one of your bridesmaids?
Well, this is my daughter's monogram, but I will put their separate monograms on each of their little pillows for them.
I think that is the most special. When I looked at it, I said, oh, wouldn't that be beautiful for a bridesmaid's gift? And Nani looked at me and said, that's exactly what I'm making. But, you know, it would also be beautiful for any kind of occasion. And I love them for pin cushions, too.
And I think tucked into a, if you were giving a baby quilt, tucked into the gift with a monogram would be wonderful.
Oh, just perfect for any occasion. Or potpourri. Now, what are you going to put? Are yours going to be?
Potpourri.
You're putting potpourri in yours?
Yes.
Nina, thank you so much for being here today.
Welcome.
We just loved having you here today. And now I have some hand embroidery for you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend Wendy Schoen. Wendy is the designer behind the Petite Pochette Pattern Company. She is a regular contributor to So Beautiful magazine. She has studied all over the world, and one of my favorite places she studied is the Royal School of Needlework in London. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Martha. It's always great and fun to be here. Today I have something interesting to talk about. We're going to talk about the most fundamental skill required for hand embroidery, and that is applying your fabric correctly in the hoop frame. I have two different types of hoops. These are the types that I use most often when I embroider. The first one is a sit-on frame or a seat frame, and it has a wooden outer hoop and a wooden inner hoop, and the hoop is actually attached to a stalk or a frame. And this, I want you to notice that I have actually wrapped the edges of my my inner hoop and my outer hoop. The reason I'm doing that is not so much to protect the fabric, but to make it more secure, and that is the most important thing you can do when you're embroidering. I'm going to go ahead and take my fabric and place it over the inner hoop, and then notice that there's a screw attachment to this the outer hoop, and that's going to be really handy for tightening up the hoop itself. So I want to put the fabric in and the hoop on top, and then make sure that you pull the wrinkles out of the fabric, but do it so that you don't pull the fabric out of kilter. So I'm going to pull it as much as I can and straighten it up as I go. And then this one is pretty tight, so I don't have to do too much tightening. But I want to make sure that I actually use a screwdriver. And I just went to the store with my husband, and an automotive store, and I bought a short screwdriver. And now he's completely convinced that I can find something to buy at just about any store. Anyway, I bought these cute little screwdrivers, and just make sure that you buy one that is small enough to fit your screw. This one is about 3/16. So you want to make sure that the fabric is nice and tight. Now that's pretty much it. And then when you embroider using this particular frame, you want to put your dominant hand below and your non-dominant hand on top, and therefore you don't have to go around and around to make it work. Now the second hoop I'd like to show you is a plastic hoop, and this hoop has a screw bolt attachment, so you don't need a screwdriver for this one. But this is the type of hoop that you do not need to wrap. It is already equipped with a mechanism that is specifically designed so that the fabric will not slip. But a lot of people use this particular hoop, and they use it incorrectly. So I want to go ahead and clear up the mystery about this once and for all. This hoop has an inner hoop that has a lip on it. The lip side goes upward. There is even, if you run your fingers around the edge, you'll see a blind embossed print that says this side up, and that means that you leave the lip side up. Then you want to position your fabric on top. Now, this outer hoop is reversible. So if you are right-handed, you want to have the hoop with the nut facing this way. And if you're left-handed, you want to bring it this way. And since I'm right-handed, I'm going to do this. Open it up almost entirely, and then it will allow you to slip it over the fabric and the lip. Now, once you have it down against the table flat, then pick it up and give it one more little pop. And you see how that lip pops up over the outer frame. Now that is what I'm talking about when I say that it's specifically designed to hold the fabric tautly. And the lip action, I guess because it comes under and around, it holds it very, very snug. I like to use these handheld hoops when I'm doing shadow work embroidery, or really any kind of embroidery where I can go hold it in my hand. You can get the fabric very, very tight in this hoop. Just keep pulling it without tightening the nut all the way. Then once you've got it really smooth, you want to give it a few more little turns and keep doing that until you've got it to where you can't really move the fabric anymore. Then tighten it completely. I see a lot of people embroidering with these. They've done it correctly so far, and then at the last minute they don't tighten it all the way. Well, that sort of defeats the purpose. So now once you get that completely tight, you have sort of a drum tightness, you're ready to go. And it will help you do your embroidery work much quicker and much better, a better quality of work if you use your hoops correctly. So Martha, that's what I have to share today.
Well, I am absolutely thrilled to hear about that. Do you usually use the one you sit on, or do you work with what is your favorite?
I'll tell you, any stitch that I have to feel the back of, in other words, like shadow work where I have to hold the needle steady with my non-stitching hand, I usually use the handheld hoop. But for fine embroidery stitches like padded satin stitch, I use the other one.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you so much, Wendy. This was fascinating. And now I have a beautiful doll dress to share with you. I think a lot of you know how much I love dolls and doll dressing. It's the perfect dress to make when you really don't have someone you're sewing for and you still want to make beautiful heirloom dresses, and if you love dolls. This doll looks so beautiful in her little dress, and the special feature I want you to notice today are special features are the double needle pin tucks, the little French laces, of course, and the Swiss batiste. Her sweet little sleeve, little puff sleeve, has entredeaux and gathered lace, and I love her wide silk ribbon. Come down and look at the skirt. I just love it. It looks good enough to eat, kind of like an ice cream cone. This has entredeaux, 2 rows of lace, beautiful rows of double needle pin tucks, more lace, entredeaux, and gathered lace on the bottom. I fell in love with double needle pin tucks many years ago, and I'd like to share with you just how easy it is to do double needle pin tucks. Now, some of you are going to say, Martha, I don't have a fancy machine, and I don't have a grooved pin tuck foot to go with my machine. Well, I'm here to tell you, you just get a double needle and use it in any machine with a regular foot if you do not have a machine where you can buy the grooved pin tuck feet, although the pin tuck feet are really nice and make them a little bit easier. First thing you're going to do is draw a line down the middle of your fabric, wherever you want the pin tucks to start, so you can center it up. Okay, that's your first step. Then you're going to, let me turn this around, then you're going to make a whole piece of double needle pin tucks before you trace the bodice of the garment on. I always make my fancy pieces when I'm going to do fancy work on a bodice, or I always make all of the pieces, and then after all of it is done, then you trace on the bodice and cut out your fabric. Now, I have already done 1 double needle pin tuck down the center. You know, you always mark the center to know where you're going to stitch. I happen to have a double needle pin tuck foot, a grooved foot. Now, the 2 double needles that I use for heirloom pin tucks, although they come wider, so you can use wider ones for other things, but I use a 1.6 or a 2.0. I think those are really pretty on batiste or on the heirloom fabrics. And you might say, now Martha, do I spray starch this fabric nice and stiff before? No, the answer is no. Just press it, because you really want the fabric not to be so stiff so it will kind of come up inside the double needle pin tuck. Another thing, you do not use a stabilizer. That's another question, because many times when we're doing heirloom sewing, we use stabilizers. So I'm using a 1.6 double needle, and if you have a pin tuck foot, you guide, space it according to where you want it to be, and you guide in the groove of the pin tuck foot. If you don't have a pin tuck foot, you just put your double needles in and just guide in your regular zigzag sewing foot. It is so much fun to make pin tucked pieces. You can actually curve and square pin tucks, or you can just make straight pin tucks. And I'm guiding, now I have the groove to guide in. And there you have your double needle pin tuck, and I'm going to make a whole piece. Now come down and look one more time at my sample here. I have done a whole row of double needle, and by the way, I have done these in blue, and it really is kind of pretty if you want to add a touch of color. We did it in blue so you could see it better on television, but it's awfully pretty to put a little color in a double needle pin tuck. But of course, on this beautiful white dress, we just did white. Anyway, you trace your bodice around there, and you're ready to cut it out for an absolutely beautiful heirloom effect. And now I'd like to invite you to join me, and I'd like to show you a beautiful piece from my vintage collection. Pin tucks have always been a beloved sewing technique. We've just seen the easy modern way to do them. Now let's look at this little dress. It's about 100 years old. It has wonderful sewing on the front. It has hand feather stitch, and I want you to notice the pin tucks. These, of course, were folded and put in by hand. 2 little rows of pin tucks, and then we'll have some insertion and some laces. And let's come over here and we'll say, let's see, 1, 2, 3 pin tucks, and then some more feather stitching, 1, 2, 3 pin tucks, and the whole bodice has pin tucks. Then this wonderful little beading that's stitched on at the bottom of the upper yoke or the upper bodice that actually would have had ribbon run through it. Now look at this sweet little long sleeve. There are no pin tucks here, but there are more feather stitches and sweet little Swiss trims. Now I told you these pin tucks were very popular, but let's go on down and see about some folded tucks on this skirt. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Tucks are just a wonderful, wonderful heirloom sewing technique then and now. A beautiful little piece of insertion and an absolutely magnificent piece of Swiss edging. Now, I always love to show you the backs of these little dresses. So let me see if I can get it out, and I did. Let me turn this little dress around and show you the back. You see we have more tucks and more of the insertion, and it was closed. Let me just show you. There's a little loop, and then there's a little button, and you see these little strings hanging loose here? That runs through a little casing in the neckline that you pull the neckline up to fit the individual child that was going to wear it. And then come on down. Of course, the back is just as pretty as the front. For my Sewing from the Heart section today, I have a wonderful letter from Marjorie Boyer, who is the regent of the General John A. Sutter chapter of the DAR, that's the Daughters of the American Revolution, from Sacramento, California. Dear Martha, there is no more deserving group than our valued armed forces veterans. The General John A. Sutter chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, has a continuing project to make lap robes for our veteran patients at the Sacramento VA Medical Center. Not only do the lap robes give warmth to the patient in a wheelchair, but protect their dignity when being wheeled within the hospital area to X-ray or other clinics. This medical center has 55 beds, and the patients are each given their choice of color lap robe they like best. One seamstress in particular uses her special sewing machine to embroider medallions in the center, which are especially appreciated. Once again, this was from Marjorie Boyer, the regent of the General John A. Sutter chapter of the DAR in Sacramento, California. Marjorie, for you and all of the wonderful DAR members around the country, we know that you so much value patriotism and you're so in honor of our veterans. Of course, we as Americans are. But I just thank you so much, you ladies in California, for all you're doing for the Veterans Hospital in Sacramento. Thank you so much for joining me in my sewing room today. I surely want to invite you to come back next time.